I should be grading papers right now, or answering university emails, but instead, here I am again, in my Uncle Jack's cellar, a place where time bends, and the scent of old wood hides more than just dust. He told me if I dug deep enough, through the quilt cabinet I'd find something. I figured it was just another one of his strange little games. But then, it was a letter, wrapped in worn cloth, embroidered with faded symbols, that looked like thorns woven into knots, and drawn in charcoal. A man, no eyes, no shadow, a solid black circle on his chest. The letter was addressed to a Reverend Elijah Granger, from a town I'd never heard of, Gallows Hill. Not even Google knows where that is. And the postmark? 89. That's usually the point where I go upstairs and ask Uncle Jack what in the world he knows about all this.
Huh. So you found the one about the shadowless stranger, huh? Knew it was only a matter of time. That cloth there. It was folded inside a false foot of a chest even my great-grandma didn't know was hollow. And what's drawn on it, that ain't just a man, Dave. That's a warning, a mark. He arrived in Gallows Hill without a horse, no bags, just a black suit, and a gaze that looked like it had seen the end of the world. But the strangest thing? No shadow, high noon, clear sky, sun blazing overhead, and not a trace behind him. The letter he left behind was more than words. It was a map, a prophecy, maybe even a trap, and that lunar event he spoke of, they say it never happened. But never is a slippery word in this world, and that symbol, he walks to a shelf. A few items shift. Yeah, I've seen it before, but not in Gallows Hill. It was on a much darker night, in a letter written in blood, by a grieving woman. But that one, you already know, don't you?
Gallows Hill, October 1889. A village tucked between grey hills and valleys, drowned in mist, the kind of place where silence feels thicker than the air, and even on clear days the sun seems to skip certain rooftops. The town was small, surrounded by dry cornfields and twisted trees like they were trying to crawl out of the soil. At the center stood a crooked wooden church, its leaning steeple and frosted glass rising like a finger pointed at the sky, accusing, resigned. At night, the windows of Gallows Hill closed early. Candles flickered, as if something were breathing, on the glass from outside. And the owls, they stopped singing that season. There was no train station, only a dirt path leading up from the south, and that's the road he came in on. Pastor Elijah Granger was a coffin nail of a man, lean, hollow-eyed, and carried a voice that could make the devil hesitate. A widower for 3 winters now, he lived alone in the parish house, surrounded by dusty theology books and an old hound, too deaf to bark. Elijah wasn't one for drama. His faith was carved from grief, nailed together by years of preaching to a flock that never broke 20 souls. He believed in the power of the word, the justice of God, and more than anything, in the order of things. That's why when he saw the stranger standing at the church door that grey afternoon, envelope in hand, eyes hidden beneath the brim of a wide hat, Elijah felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. The man said nothing. He simply handed the letter, gave a slight bow, respectful, almost ceremonial, and turned away. By reflex, Elijah looked to the ground behind him and saw no shadow. When he glanced back to the road, the man was gone. The envelope bore his name, in his own handwriting, but he had never written it. The letter began without greeting. No dear pastor, no introduction, just a sentence, as if continuing a conversation paused. For centuries, on the night of the second eclipse when the moon stops above Gallows Hill, ring the bell 3 times. The doors must be shut. The circle must not break. Elijah read the lines with his brow furrowed. Eclipse. There wasn't one scheduled, and even if there was, why ring the bell? What circle, and who had written this? At the bottom, printed, in thick black ink, a symbol. Elijah tried to dismiss it. He slid the page into an old psalm and closed the book. But something had already shifted. Tuesday. The washroom mirror cracked on its own. No one had touched it. Wednesday. The chapel candles all went dark. No breeze, no draft, just darkness. Thursday. A village boy pointed to the sky at noon and whispered, "The moon is watching." And on Friday, Elijah's old dog began growling at the empty pulpit, and he never stopped. Saturday night. Elijah returned to the letter. He locked his study door, lit a thick candle, and opened the Bible where he'd hidden the envelope. But this time, there was something more. A single petal, black, withered. It smelled faintly of iron. No such flower grew anywhere near Gallows Hill. Of that, Elijah was certain. He searched for news of an eclipse, almanacs, astronomical records, even wrote a letter to the Reverend in Woodvine. Nothing. No eclipse forecasted. No event. And yet, the letter remained. When the moon stops over Gallows Hill, then came the signs. The hens stopped laying. Small children began speaking in their sleep, whispering the same phrase over and over. "He is coming." And, stranger still, the church bell rang once on its own just before dusk, one heavy toll that echoed across the hills like a warning from someplace else. Tuesday arrived, and for exactly 2 minutes, time stopped. Not just for Elijah, for everyone. Clocks froze. Birds fell mid-flight. The fog ceased to drift. 2 full minutes of absolute silence. When movement returned, Elijah noticed something beneath the altar. A symbol drawn in chalk, but not ordinary chalk. The mark had scorched the wood, etched in like it had been burned by a finger no longer made of flesh. And on Wednesday, an old farmer was found kneeling in the fields, eyes wide open, but without pupils, murmuring in a rasped voice, "What casts no shadow has no need for light." Thursday night, the moon rose red. From the belfry tower, Elijah watched it swell on the horizon, larger than he'd ever seen it, bloated. Still, it didn't climb. It didn't move. It hovered. He swallowed hard. The bell, the warning. With trembling hands, he grasped the rope and rang it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Each toll echoed like a funeral knell. The windows rattled. The pews creaked, as if something moved between them unseen. His dog howled from the back room, scratching at the door so hard its paws began to bleed. Outside, the town froze. People stood still in the streets, faces turned skyward, not blinking, not breathing. A child let go of a balloon, but it didn't rise. It hovered, weightless, suspended in the thickened air. And then Elijah saw him. In the graveyard, leaning against a headstone, was the stranger. Same black suit, same wide-brimmed hat. But now, no eyes, only smooth, pale skin where his face should have been. The symbol on his chest glowed, like a burning coal embedded in flesh. Elijah ran down the church steps, through the nave, slamming the doors open to the night. But time was slipping, falling away like sand through broken fingers. The stranger was still there, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, more figures emerged, identical, eyeless, shadowless, each bearing a version of the mark. On the neck, the palms, the brow. They said nothing, only stood there, still, watching, or seeming to. And then the world went dark. The writing falters, the lines bleed with soot, or maybe dried blood. I rang the bell. The circle is closed. They came from where time doesn't end. The moon, it refuses to leave. Do not sleep beneath its light. Do not break the silence. The seal has opened. The final sentence is barely legible, written by a trembling hand. There is no shadow where there is no soul. And then, no signature, only the symbol, scratched deep into the parchment, so hard it nearly tore the paper in 2. The letter was found sealed beneath the altar, decades later, during a renovation of the old chapel, now abandoned, half swallowed by forest. Its name forgotten on modern maps, Elijah Granger, was never seen again. But in the graveyard of Gallows Hill, a headstone bears his name and the date of his death, carved 1 day before, the night of the eclipse.
Gallows Hill. Now that's a name you don't hear much anymore. Maybe because folks were never meant to hear it. Or maybe because it only exists when it needs to. That Pastor Granger, stubborn as they come, but brave, he rang that bell, without knowing who was listening, or why, and those things that came. No eyes, no shadows. Some say they're the time watchers. Others call them the clickers. Me, I like to think of them as silence collectors. Everybody's forgotten something, son. They just come for what's left. And that symbol, yeah, that one. Ever seen this? Found it in a dry well, middle of a no-name town. Same. Day the moon froze in place, right above this barn. Coincidence? Maybe. But I've lived long enough to know coincidence is just the pretty word we use when we're afraid to call it what it is.
Hold on, Jack. 2 things. First, that symbol. It's the same one from the widow Blackwood's letter. I'm sure of it. She also wrote about something that came from outside of time. This can't just be a coincidence. And second, that eclipse. I checked the astronomical records. There's nothing listed for 1889, not even close. So either the letter's lying, or whatever happened in a place that doesn't follow our rules. You said you saw the moon stop too. Here. How? That's not in any newspaper, not in any record. And those clickers, what do they want, Jack?
You ask too many questions, Dave. That's good, but it's dangerous too. Symbols, eclipses, letters showing up where they don't belong. It's just the land talking, and sometimes it whispers to those who still know how to listen. You think time's a straight line, but what if it's a loop, a knot, or worse, a spiral? The moon's full tonight, too pretty to be trusted.
Jack, are you saying this could all happen again?
Maybe, boy. Maybe it just hasn't happened yet.
One last question, Jack. The letter. It reads like someone who lived through it, but it was addressed to Reverend Elijah Granger, and yet it tells his story. How's that possible?
Some letters ain't written to explain. They're written to remember. And sometimes what they remember don't make sense till you've seen it yourself. You're asking the kind of question that don't come with answers, only echoes. And you don't chase an echo, boy. You wait. And one day, if it's meant for you, it speaks back.
They said he was 19 when he vanished, and still 19 when he returned. 4 decades later, no wrinkles, no change, not even a scratch. Who is the boy in the barn, and why? Hasn't he aged a single day?